No cocktail. He made me taste something hot. The room shimmered with luxury. Crystal chandeliers casting a golden glow over tuxedo-clad men and elegantly dressed women, their conversations a soft hum beneath the refined classical music. This wasn't just any event. It was an exclusive cocktail party, the kind where the elite gathered, deals were sealed over glasses of aged whiskey, and secrets were exchanged in hushed tones. I wasn't supposed to be here. At least that's how it felt. Dressed in a tailored black suit, I blended in well enough, but deep down I knew I wasn't like the others. I was here for business, not pleasure. Yet the air was thick with something else. Anticipation. And then, I saw him. A man with dark, slicked-back hair, piercing eyes, and a confidence that seemed to command the room. He moved effortlessly, his deep blue suit fitting him like a second skin, his smirk carrying the kind of arrogance that was infuriatingly attractive. And before I even realized what was happening, he was coming straight toward me. What I didn't know was that this night would change everything. Because before it was over, he would make me taste something I'd never forget. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of our passionate, dramatic, and intense love stories. Now, let's begin. I adjusted my cufflinks for what felt like the 100th time, trying to ground myself in the glimmering atmosphere of the exclusive cocktail party. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with aged whiskey and polished leather, wrapping the entire room in an aura of wealth and power. It wasn't that I didn't belong here. I had been invited, after all, but there was something about these events that always made me feel like an outsider. I wasn't the type to indulge in meaningless conversations about investments, luxury cars, or the latest private club opening, but tonight, I had to play the part. Then, I saw him. The moment he entered the room, everything changed. Tall, confident, and devastatingly attractive, he commanded attention without even trying. His dark hair was neatly styled, his chiseled jawline accentuated by the soft lighting, and his deep blue suit was tailored so perfectly that it might as well have been sculpted onto his body. He wasn't just beautiful. He was dangerous. And for some reason, he was looking at me. Our eyes met across the room, and a slow smirk curled at his lips. It was the kind of smirk that could melt the resolve of even the most disciplined man. My breath hitched, my fingers tightening around the glass of whiskey in my hand. I wasn't used to being noticed like this, but he didn't just notice me. He was studying me. He took his time weaving through the crowd, nodding politely to people who clearly knew him but never breaking eye contact with me. There was something deliberate in the way he moved, as if he had already decided that tonight I was going to be his entertainment. By the time he stopped in front of me, I was barely breathing. "Not a fan of these events?" he asked, his voice smooth, laced with amusement. I swallowed hard. That obvious? He tilted his head slightly, pretending to assess me. "Let's just say, you don't exactly blend in with the Wall Street crowd." I raised an eyebrow, the flicker of a challenge in my voice. "And you do?" His smirk widened. "I blend in wherever I want to." That should have annoyed me. Instead, it intrigued me. He was effortlessly confident, the kind of man who never had to second-guess himself. Meanwhile, I was here feeling like an imposter, counting down the minutes until I could slip away unnoticed. But now, I had his attention, and that changed everything. He glanced at the untouched whiskey in my hand and hummed. "You don't seem like a whiskey guy." I frowned slightly. "And what do I seem like?" His eyes glowed with something dangerously close to mischief. "Someone who likes to play it safe." Before I could respond, he signaled to the bartender. "One espresso martini," he ordered smoothly. I blinked. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," he said, his voice low, teasing. "But trust me, you'll like it." A moment later, the bartender slid the glass toward him. He picked it up, twirling the stem between his fingers before holding it out to me. "Go on," he murmured, his eyes never leaving mine. I hesitated. This was a game. I could feel it. He was testing me, seeing if I would push back or if I'd let him lead. And for some reason, I wasn't sure which one I wanted more. Slowly, I reached for the glass. Our fingers brushed. Heat shot through me like an electric current, making my pulse stutter. It was just a simple touch, a fleeting moment, but the way his gaze darkened told me that he felt it too. I lifted the glass to my lips, taking a slow sip. The rich, velvety taste of espresso and vodka spread over my tongue, smooth and indulgent. He watched me intently, his smirk never wavering. "See? Something hot suits you better." My breath caught. I wasn't sure if he was talking about the drink anymore. Before I could respond, he leaned in just enough for his breath to brush against my ear. "I think you should let me show you a few more things." I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening around the glass. I had walked into this event expecting nothing. But now, I was completely captivated, and I had no idea where this night was about to take me. I should have walked away. I should have laughed off his comment, thanked him for the drink, and disappeared into the crowd like I had planned. But instead I stood there, holding that damn espresso martini completely caught in his orbit. His eyes, dark, unwavering, were locked on me like he was waiting for something. A reaction, a refusal, maybe even a challenge. I wasn't sure if I wanted to give him any of those things. "I take it you like it," he said, tilting his head slightly. The taste of espresso and vodka still lingered on my tongue. I cleared my throat, willing my voice to sound normal. "It's different." His lips twitched. "You don't like different?" I let out a slow breath, my fingers tightening around the stem of the glass. I usually know what to expect from a drink. This one caught me off guard. His smirk deepened. Maybe that's a good thing. There it was again. That push, that subtle invitation to step out of my comfort zone. I didn't know him, but something about the way he spoke, the way he studied me, made me feel like he had already figured out more than I was willing to admit. I had spent my entire life playing it safe. I liked things in order, predictable, controlled, but nothing about him felt safe. And yet, I hadn't walked away. "All right," I said, lowering my glass. "You've got me curious. Who exactly am I drinking with?" He leaned back slightly, as if amused by my question. "Ethan." I repeated the name in my head, letting it settle. It suited him. Sharp, confident, effortlessly smooth. He lifted an eyebrow. "And you are?" I hesitated for half a second before answering. "Daniel." He let my name roll over his tongue like he was testing it out, deciding if it suited me. "Daniel," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. The way he said it sent an unexpected warmth curling in my chest. I wasn't prepared for him. Ethan took a sip of his own drink, eyes never leaving mine. "So, Daniel, what brings you to this particular playground?" I let out a small chuckle, shaking my head. "Work. A client insisted I come. It's not really my scene." Ethan's eyes flickered with something unreadable. I could tell. I arched a brow. "That obvious?" He smirked. "Let's just say you don't have the same polished arrogance as most of the men here." I let out a breath of amusement. Should I be insulted? Not at all. He took another slow sip of his drink, then set the glass down on the bar. "It's actually the most interesting thing about you." The heat in his gaze was undeniable. He was toying with me,
testing my reactions, seeing how far I would let this go. I had no idea what game he was playing, but I could feel the rules shifting beneath my feet. Before I could respond, a woman approached him, placing a hand on his arm. "Ethan," she purred, "you disappeared." I watched as he gave her a polite but detached smile. "Just meeting someone new?" Her gaze flicked to me, scanning me like she was trying to place my significance in his world. She didn't linger long. With a forced smile, she excused herself, but the moment was enough. Ethan turned back to me, his expression unreadable. "You look like you have a question." I debated whether to say it. Then, against my better judgment, I asked, "Are you here with someone?" A loaded question, a reckless one. Ethan's lips parted slightly, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Are you asking if I'm taken?" I exhaled slowly. "I'm asking if I should even be standing here right now." He studied me for a moment, then leaned in just slightly, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath against my skin. "If I were," he said, voice low, "I wouldn't be looking at you like this." My chest tightened. I was in trouble. I should have had an answer for him. I should have laughed, shrugged off the intensity of the moment, or at least come up with something clever to diffuse the way my heart was pounding. But I couldn't. Because Ethan was still looking at me like that. Like I was the only thing in this crowded, glittering ballroom that had caught his attention. I swallowed, my fingers tightening around the glass in my hand. "You have a way of making things sound intentional." Ethan tilted his head slightly, his smirk lazy, confident. "That's because they are." His honesty knocked the air out of me. I had spent years surrounded by people who spoke in half-truths, dancing around what they really meant, always keeping their cards close to their chest. Ethan was different. He didn't hedge his words. He didn't hesitate. He wanted me to know exactly what he was thinking. And that was dangerous. I set my drink down on the bar, needing something, anything, to ground myself. "You don't even know me," I said, my voice lower than I intended. Ethan's dark eyes flickered, scanning my face like he was memorizing every reaction. "I know enough." A slow burn crawled up my spine. "What is it you think you know?" I asked. Ethan leaned in slightly, his voice just above a whisper. "I know you didn't come here looking for this." He was right. I hadn't. I had arrived tonight with the plan to shake hands, smile at the right people, and leave before the champagne flutes were empty. But now, my entire focus was on him. The way his gaze never wavered, the way his presence filled every space he entered. "And I know," Ethan continued, his breath warm against my skin, "that you're still standing here, which means part of you is just as curious as I am." I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my throat. He was relentless. There was no escape, no pretending this wasn't happening. Ethan was unraveling me, piece by piece, and I had no idea how to stop him. A sudden burst of laughter erupted from a group near us, breaking the tension just enough for me to breathe again. I took a step back, needing space, but Ethan didn't seem fazed. If anything, he looked amused. "You always this forward?" I asked, attempting to regain some control. Ethan took a slow sip of his drink before answering. "Only when I see something worth pursuing." The weight of his words settled between us, thick and heavy. My stomach twisted in a way I wasn't sure I liked. I should have excused myself then. Made up a polite reason to step away, pretend this conversation never happened. But before I could, Ethan moved closer, his fingers grazing the sleeve of my jacket in a touch so fleeting, so deliberate, that I barely processed it before my entire body reacted. A sharp inhale, a spike of adrenaline. And then, the most unexpected thing happened.
Someone bumped into me from behind, and before I could steady myself, Ethan caught me. His hands were firm, one gripping my forearm, the other at my waist. I wasn't sure if the world had tilted or if it was just the way his touch ignited something reckless inside me. "Easy," he murmured, his voice suddenly softer, more intimate. I stared at him, my breath coming too fast. He was too close now. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, as if realizing just how much I had let happen, I pulled away, stepping back quickly. Ethan's expression didn't change. He didn't smirk, didn't push. He just let the moment settle, his eyes still locked on mine. I exhaled, shaking my head slightly. I should probably— "Stay," Ethan interrupted smoothly. My chest tightened. He wasn't asking. He was telling me. And the worst part? I wanted to. I should have walked away. Every instinct told me to step back, to put distance between myself and Ethan, to break whatever spell he was casting over me before it became too strong. But I didn't move. Because the truth was, I didn't want to. His words hung in the air between us, a challenge and a promise all at once. Stay. And I had no excuse not to. Ethan watched me carefully, his dark eyes gleaming with something unreadable. He knew he had me. He knew I was hesitating, teetering on the edge of something reckless, something dangerous. And he was waiting for me to fall. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, to break the tension. But before I could, the sound of glass shattering cut through the conversation. The entire room stilled. I turned just in time to see a server scrambling to pick up broken crystal, his face pale as he apologized to a furious older man in a sharp tuxedo. Ethan let out a slow breath beside me. "That's Philip Langford," he said under his breath. "The host of this little soiree." Philip Langford's face was a mask of irritation. "Do you have any idea what this cost?" He snapped at the server, his voice sharp, biting. I frowned, shifting slightly. Accidents happened. This was unnecessary. "I'm sorry, sir." The server stammered. "You're sorry?" Langford sneered. "You think that's enough?" He glanced around, as if waiting for someone to agree with him. Instead, he found Ethan stepping forward. "I think it is," Ethan said smoothly. Langford's expression twisted. "Excuse me?" Ethan gave a slow, deliberate smile. "It's a glass, Philip. It can be replaced." His tone was light, but there was an unmistakable edge beneath it. Langford's eyes flickered to me, then back to Ethan, his lips pressed into a thin line. "You always did enjoy sticking your nose where it didn't belong," he muttered. My chest tightened. They knew each other. Ethan chuckled, completely unfazed. "And you always did enjoy making a scene." Langford's jaw tensed, but before he could respond, someone from across the room called his name, and with one last glare, he turned away, leaving the server to hurriedly clean up the mess. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair. "Well," he said, turning back to me, "that was entertaining." I stared at him, still piecing things together. "You know him?" Ethan smirked. "Know him? I used to be him." A strange feeling twisted in my stomach. "What does that mean?" Ethan tilted his head slightly. "It means I spent too many years in rooms like this, pretending to care about people like that." There was something else in his voice now, something colder, heavier. I suddenly realized I didn't know anything about him. And yet, here I was, wanting to. Ethan must have seen something in my expression because his smirk softened just slightly. "I won't lie to you, Daniel. I know how to play this game. I know how to navigate this world." His gaze darkened. "But I don't belong to it anymore." I didn't know why, but that made my breath hitch. For the first time since I met him, Ethan wasn't teasing me. He wasn't playing a game. He was telling me the truth, and I had the sudden, terrifying feeling that if I let him, he could unravel me completely. I didn't know what to say. Ethan's confession hung in the air between us, stripping away the teasing, the arrogance, the carefully crafted confidence he had worn all night. For the first time, he had given me a glimpse behind the mask, and I wanted to see more. But before I could press him for answers, a waiter passed by with a tray of drinks, and Ethan reached for 2 glasses, handing me one with an easy smirk, as if nothing had happened. "Let's make a toast, shall we?" I hesitated before accepting the glass. A toast to what? Ethan clinked his glass lightly against mine. To bad habits. I exhaled a quiet laugh, shaking my head. And which one are we talking about? Ethan leaned in just slightly, his voice dropping lower. Me chasing things I shouldn't. His eyes flickered over me. And you pretending you don't like it. My throat went dry. This was dangerous. Not just because of Ethan, not just because of how effortlessly he slipped under my skin, but because of what he was pulling out of me. Before tonight, I had never let myself explore this side of me. I had been careful, reserved, safe. But he was a temptation I didn't know how to resist. And the worst part? I wasn't sure I wanted to. I took a sip of my drink, needing something to ground me. "And what happens when we run out of bad habits?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Ethan hummed, as if amused by the thought. "Then we make new ones." He was unrelenting, and I was losing control. I should have left then. I should have excused myself, walked away before I let him drag me any further into whatever this was. But before I could even consider it, the room dimmed, and a low murmur passed through the crowd. I followed Ethan's gaze to the small stage near the center of the ballroom, where Philip Langford, the host of this gala, the man Ethan had openly challenged, was taking the microphone. Ethan sighed, swirling the liquid in his glass. "Here comes the self-indulgent speech." I glanced at him. "You really don't like him, do you?" Ethan's jaw tightened just slightly. "Let's just say he and I have different ideas of morality." That wasn't a casual statement. That was personal. And just as I was about to push him for more, Langford spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen." Langford's voice rang through the ballroom, smug and commanding. "Tonight, we celebrate success, power, and the unwavering strength it takes to be at the top. But success is never without its casualties." A few polite chuckles spread through the room, but Ethan's entire body stiffened beside me. I frowned. "What is it?" Ethan's fingers curled tightly around his glass. His gaze locked onto Langford like he was waiting for something, dreading something. "Tonight," Langford continued, "I'd like to acknowledge someone who once stood in these circles, someone who played this game brilliantly." He paused for effect. "And yet, somehow lost." The shift in the room was instant. A few people exchanged glances, a ripple of knowing moving through the crowd. I turned to Ethan, but his face had darkened completely. Langford's eyes gleamed as he continued. "A man who thought he could rewrite the rules, but ended up proving that no one is untouchable." Then he looked directly at Ethan. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just some vague anecdote. This was about him. Ethan set his glass down with deliberate calm. "And there it is." I felt like I was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. "Ethan, what the hell is going on?" Ethan's smirk returned, but this time it was cold, sharp. "This, Daniel," he murmured, "is the part where you decide if you really want to know me." The room had gone quiet, but my heart was pounding. Ethan stood still, his smirk gone, replaced by something colder, sharper.
Langford had just humiliated him in front of everyone. But why? I needed to know. I reached for his arm, hesitating before touching him. "Ethan," I said carefully. "What is he talking about?" He didn't look at me at first. He just exhaled, his jaw tight. "Old sins." A chill ran down my spine. What did that mean? Before I could push further, he turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Do you trust me?" The question caught me off guard. Did I? I barely knew him, but something about him had hooked me from the beginning. I didn't answer right away, but I didn't need to.
Ethan nodded as if he already knew. "Come with me," he said. And against all logic, against every warning in my head, I followed him. We stepped out onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing against my skin. Away from the crowd, away from Langford's voice, I could finally breathe. Ethan turned to me, his eyes dark and honest for the first time. "I used to be like them," he admitted. "I played their game. I climbed fast, made enemies faster. But when I realized how corrupt it all was, I walked away." I swallowed hard. "And Langford?" His lips curled in disgust. He didn't like that I left, so now he makes sure I never forget it. Something inside me ached at his words. He had spent the entire night charming, teasing, controlling the narrative, but here, now, he was just Ethan. No games, no pretense. I stepped closer, my pulse hammering in my throat. "And why me?" Ethan's gaze softened. "Because you're not like them." The heat between us was undeniable, but this was more than attraction. I had spent the whole night trying to resist him, but maybe I hadn't wanted to. His fingers grazed mine, just a whisper of contact. My choice. I could walk away, or I could let this happen. I made my choice. I closed the space between us, and then, finally, I kissed him. And just like that, the fire between us exploded.